Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Really excited to have this continuance of the public debate series as sponsored by the Center for AI and the Liberal Arts. And my name is Anand Rao. I'm a faculty member here in Communication Digital Studies and also serving as director of the center this year. And I've been really looking forward to this event in particular because the question about AI and its impact on creativity and how AI might be used for creative purposes, but also how it might hinder creativity is an incredibly important one. As someone as a sibling who's an artist, who has always really enjoyed engaging in really creative ventures myself, I'm not sure how to parse a lot of that out. And I find myself answering the question in different ways. So we have a good provocative topic. It's not to say that we're actually voting on what the university is going to be doing, but it is a way to frame the discussion for today, as we do with all of the public debates. Now, this debate is a little different in that it's not just the typical pro versus con debate. After having some lengthy discussions with Professor Robinson, Professor Straczynski, we talked a bit about another approach to this discussion that I think will still give us the chance to explore these topics, to be able to really interrogate this idea about what the role AI should take in creative arts, in art classes, in the role and the relationship between AI and creativity. But instead of having a pro versus con debate, we have two practitioners and two faculty members that have been exploring these issues, looking at this as both from a pedagogical perspective, also from the perspective of their students, have talked to other artists and creatives that have been thinking about how do you make use of AI tools? Should you make use of AI tools? And even if you do make use of them, where do they fall in within the educational process? Is this something people should be using from the beginning, maybe later on, only after a certain step? These aren't easy questions to answer, but they're important questions. And so I'm really excited to be able to get into this a little bit today. So what we'll do is we have a format of this way. We have really 4 statements, and they were outlined in the email that was sent to a lot of the faculty and most of you on campus. And these are statements that are often made about the relationship between AI and creativity. And then both of our faculty participants will have a chance to respond and comment on these. They might agree with it, they might disagree with it, maybe offer some nuance and some other interpretations of how you might interpret this idea, what you might be able to do with it, what the implications might be. And it looks like they're ready to share a little bit, some visual aids as well, demonstrations of perhaps what can be produced or what is produced to show maybe the good or the bad. We'll see exactly what they're able to do with that. Start by giving my thanks to Professor Jameson Robinson from Studio Art. Let's give him a round of applause, please. A.B. Straczynski from Common Digital Studies. I promised them my own AI slot to advertise the event. The touch of AI for the creatives. This won't be on screen long because they'll be moving on to some of their own visuals in a minute. What I want to start with is a statement that's often made about how AI might change art production. Some may say this is a rationalization. It's a claim that's made sometimes by some of the companies and the technologists working with AI. But I want to start with this statement and see how both JD and Jason are responding to this. The claim that AI democratizes art production by providing the tools, providing the platforms, the access. What does that mean for producing art? What does it mean for democratizing the artistic process?
Not to take you off already. Can we do some opening remarks?
Please. Yeah, please go right ahead.
Yeah. This is Manfred Pate, one of my favorite artists of all time. And he once said, "I use technology to hate it properly." This is one of my all-time favorite quotes about art or anything else. What Pate understood is that real critique requires proximity. If you want to challenge a tool, especially one that's pervasive as television was then or AI is now, you have to engage with it directly. You have to get inside it. Pate immersed himself in a number of emerging media technologies throughout his career without ever surrendering his critical perspective. He used the tools, but he never trusted them. That hatred he describes isn't rejection. It's a form of rigorous skeptical engagement, a way of looking closely, of understanding how something works, where it fails, and what it does to us. Because if you don't approach technology with that kind of clarity and objectivity when using it for art making, you're just demonstrating a tool. You're doing a tech demo. Being able to gain firsthand experience with generative AI allows us to reveal its biases and limitations. It allows us to not see not just see what it produces, but how it produces, and what gets lost in the process. Also, I want to be clear, choosing not to engage is also a valid position. I find the argument that AI isn't going away, so you just have to accept it to be disingenuous and defeatist. Refusal should remain an option, like choosing to not own a car or not to eat meat, even if that choice becomes harder over time. Because the anxieties around AI are real, we're already seeing an over-reliance on systems like ChatGPT or generative image tools, and it raises uncomfortable questions. Are we losing our ability to think critically, to struggle, to arrive at ideas through effort? When a company generates a logo instead of hiring a designer, or a soundtrack instead of working with a musician, we're not just displacing labor, we're eroding the humanity that gives culture its meaning.
So I think I want to frame a little bit my interests in AI. Maybe I can back a little bit, uh, which is primarily been around video production. So it'll differ a little bit from Jason in that regard. I got a chance to use a lot of these tools. Runway, Adobe Firefly, Sora, which excitingly they announced was shut down like yesterday, which is wild timing for this. But I'll get to that more later. But this provocative question that's on its posed to us, right, about whether we should ban these tools outright. As you mentioned, we asked for not a debate because I think neither of us felt comfortable arguing a pro AI position or maybe qualified to do that. But I think beyond that, I think we didn't feel comfortable with this binary consideration, like I didn't, of AI as AI good, AI bad, specifically when it comes to video, visual production, art production. Because unlike text-based AI, which is usually the center of these types of conversations, AI has been in production software like Photoshop, After Effects, Maya, these things we use all the time for decades. I remember using a text to speech tool to auto generate captions when I was in college. So they've been around a little while. Uh, the amount of AI powered tools in these programs has certainly jumped. And even freeware like a Canva, you're going to see those generative functions all over the place. But I think the reason why a good bad binary doesn't work here is simply because if you're making visual work, it's hard to opt out, right? It's hard. I mean, you're right. You can use fully analog materials, but there isn't this clear demarcation point as there often is with text-based tools of like, this is AI, this is not. So I think we need a different scale, a different way of assessment here. Because I think to ban AI outright, certainly the case of closest I teach would be to get rid of all the software that allows us to produce stuff right now. So for my part in these responses, I want to assess the value of these AI tools across a different binary than pro or anti, and instead consider are these tools amplifying creativity or are they replacing us as a creator? I think this is a very case by case basis. Some of these tools do have this democratizing, enabling quality that they advertise. Others will absolutely make you feel like bystanders in your own production. And I think what the tools we want to have available on our campus, the tools we want to have on our labs, for the creative community here to use, I think is incredibly valuable to pinpoint what separates AI tools that are going to empower us from those that de-skill and diminish us.
We've reached a strange moment where the synthetic is becoming normalized, and many people trust machine outputs more than human ones. And while at the same time, we've become so skeptical that we assume anything slightly out of the ordinary is AI generated, that confusion, what we might call it kind of hallucination of the real, it creates a real challenge for artists and educators. So I'm less interested today in discussing like if AI is good or bad. Chances are you already have a very strong opinion about that. And I'm excited to hear them. I'm here to suggest that if we want to understand it, if we want to critique it with any kind of precision, we need to study it up close and not to embrace it necessarily, but to see it more clearly. And that's what I hope to unpack together today. So when we talk about democratization, we have to be precise. Art has always been available to everyone. The barrier has never been creativity itself. It was access to tools, time, and education. And when everyone is working through these black box systems, these AI systems, we aren't expanding creative possibility. We're seeing a narrowing of it. It's a stylistic flattening, whether you're thinking about the mid-journey aesthetic or now seed dance or the Suno sound, we're seeing a recognizable, algorithmically produced aesthetic that despite its promise of infinite possibilities feels strangely new. It's also important to ask, like, who built this democratized system? You cannot talk about AI without talking about consent. These models were trained on the work of millions of without permission, compensation, or acknowledgement. Right now, this version of democratization looks a lot like privatization. Massive data sets of human creativity repackaged into subscription tools owned by a handful of corporations. For a liberal arts education, this matters immensely. Art isn't just about the finished image, it's about inquiry. It's about thinking, struggling, and discovering something through the process. If the labor we're automating is actually the thinking, we aren't democratizing creativity, we're outsourcing it. Real democratization in education isn't just a generate button, it's literacy. It's the ability to create, to subvert, and use these systems in ways that developers never intended. Democracy and art isn't about ease, it's about agency. However, I have to complicate my stance here with an example from my own life. I'm the director of a film festival called Odds and Ends. And this year we received many actually, completely AI generated shorts. And honestly, most of them were not very good. But I noticed something interesting when I started looking at who made these shorts. Almost all of them were made by people in their 70s, 80s. We've never had submissions from that demographic before, and certainly not a bunch of them. And if not for these tools, my guess is that these people probably would not have made these films, considering we never had an 83-year-old submit a film to our festival before. I don't really know what that means. And it suggests that these tools are providing a bridge for a generation that has stories and has intent, but perhaps lacks the physical dexterity or the technical training or the mobility to use a camera or to learn an editing program. It's a good reminder that this discussion can get a little messy, and sometimes the slop, as we've been calling it, might be giving a voice to someone who was not previously speaking up.
I think I can add to that. Would you mind putting on the slide or the browser window with just my Sora window there? Because I think I want to. You brought up the ethical issues, which I think are paramount here. I think I want to consider kind of why it's just kind of a bummer to use these tools as somebody who has used them. And I think at least Chloe is in this room, and we had the chance to use a lot of this stuff over the summer for a full month. And kind of what we found from just spending a long time trying to work in Sora, Runway, some of these tools out there. So yeah, I'll get
And that's all over here.
Oh, and maybe it closed. In which case, that's perfectly fine. We don't necessarily need that. I wonder where it went. Anyway, so I'll just kind of paraphrase what happened there. So this democratization thing is probably the most popular bit of messaging. Certainly, I found coming across with a lot of these AI tools, right? That this software can make video production. It's very technical, expensive, exclusive process available to everyone, as you're seeing, right? People who normally would not have the ability to make a film now can make a short film. Great. And it's really not, I mean, that's not nothing, right? Short films, cameras are expensive, software is expensive, actors, crew, lighting, mics. One of the reasons we can do that here on campus is because you have access to all the tools and we can provide that. But for somebody outside, yeah, that's great. This can happen. The problem I found, certainly with democratization, at least how it's being defined within these programs, is it's just automation by another name. So if I were able to look at the discontinued kit, so again, I played around with it moments, I guess, before it shut down yesterday. Theoretically, anyone can use it, and you work like ChatGPT. You type in a prompt, boom, there's your thing. So I was playing around with like a koala bear dressed as a professor looking at the moon, and it was pretty great. Like I typed it in, and it gave me something that looked like a little koala astronomer gazing at the moon. Awesome. The problem, their costs, there's ethical and costs, real. But at the same time, for how much technical expertise that took, which is literally the ability to string a sentence together and produce it, that's pretty remarkable. Like just a few years ago, you would have taken a lot of time in the software and all these things to be able to produce that clip on your own. So great. That's democratization, right? The issue comes in what you can do with that koala clip, right? So what if I want to have the koala have little spectacles? Maybe I want it to look at Saturn instead. Maybe I want it to have a little cane, or maybe I want it to cut to a close up of its wondrous gaze at the moon. And then I get a little point of view shot where it's looking up at the moon. You can't do that in Sora. And right now you can't do that in any video generator at all. I've had this debate with Uganda about this a year and a half. We've been talking about this. It still has not broken through, right? And these tools have advanced, but this idea of actually being able to create stories, to build and make stuff with it really has not been cracked. For the most part, it's just going to give you little clips of koalas and that's it, right? So even as the generators are adding sound, higher resolution, better graphics, all that, they haven't solved the storytelling issue. And I think it's partially why Sora no longer exists. And I think a lot of these other tools are not going to be with us, hopefully, for much longer, because we don't have people making movies. We don't have people being creative with these tools because you can't really create with them. They are just built to make slop. Now, I don't think that's the full picture of AI when it comes to video and media production. I want to paint another smaller picture. But as far as this democratization question, I think that's the key context, right? That this sort of automation, it really doesn't lead to true creativity. As someone who's interested in putting multiple shots together to create something greater than the sum of its parts, I'm not sold on that benefit at all.
So on that point, and tying back to something that Jason was saying about the capability to produce something for maybe a demographic that otherwise wouldn't have had access, thinking about the film festival, what about the claim that AI pushes art in new directions? Maybe it's not in the directions we would necessarily like it to go, but is there something to the claim that it can push art in new directions, that there are capabilities that are being extended to individuals or to groups that otherwise wouldn't have it?
Well, I had a need for you. I forgot about. This is what my last part about thinking about what's real and what's not. This is a discussion I have with my mom all the time. Okay, so new directions, like, well, what are these new directions? I did a lot of research leading up to this talk and trying to really look at like what AI generated content was and what was happening. But I do know that this is, I learned this morning, this is the most popular thing going on in the AI world right now. I'll just leave this up here. So, like I said, a lot of research of this disposable content, meme culture, a lot of political propaganda, a lot of fake media. As someone who loves movies and sports and politics, it's like perfect fertile ground for just making stuff up. And then just other stuff like this algorithmic slop. You could argue these are new directions, but they're not necessarily ones anyone was asking for. Historically, new innovations in art come from rupture, from artists breaking with conventions, looking outside dominant systems, or inventing entirely new ways of seeing. AI doesn't work that way by design. It looks inward. It's trained on existing data, and it generates by predicting what is most likely to come next based on what has already been made. So if art starts drifting toward the most probable image, we're not really getting new directions. We're getting stuff in a recursive loop. Jerry Saltz, the art critic, he said recently there was a 60 Minutes piece about AI art, and he referred to AI art as an average of averages trained on even more algorithmically generated averages. So instead of becoming more inventive, it becomes broader and flatter at the same time. That said, I don't think this is the end of the conversation because there's artists that have always found ways to push against tools that they're given. We talked about Nanjing Pate, my North Star for this talk. He once said, television has been attacking us all of our lives. Now we can attack it back. And I think that mindset still applies. The most interesting possibilities with AI aren't in using it as intended, but in misusing it, glitching it, breaking it, forcing errors, and finding ways to push it beyond its own logic. I think that's where things start getting interesting because maybe AI doesn't inherently push art in new directions, but artists still can.
Yeah, I think that glitch is the answer here for me as well. the interesting things that can happen when these tools hallucinate, which is again not against the intention of the tool. But like as Jason said, this is AI is fundamentally a remix engine, so it's just taking all the clips it unethically gobbled up and spits out very to fit your prompt, as you mentioned. I think of it like a Coke freestyle machine at Wawa or something, where I guess you can like create a new soda from mixing like grape Fanta and like Diet Coke, but are you really creating a new direction in soda? Probably not. You're like have your existing things, and that's not the best you can do. Another big issue, I think, to follow my koala example, is that visual AI tools, they are terrible at taking direction. The variant I had there was me trying to do anything. Basically, the koala, as I had it, just would not look out at the window. Like its telescope was always pointed at a wall or somewhere. It's like, look out the window, koala. And it just never could do that. It doesn't do well with small scale adjustments or any sort of small details, which in art making and production is the devil is in the details, all about that sort of precision. For visual materials, it's also hard to follow a direction that it gives you. I think about this in the context of video production. So say for a chatbot, or a decent argument I've heard for, integration of text and how that can maybe push a right to a new direction. I think that's because it can spit out some text for you and maybe it frames an art in a way you hadn't heard before. And then you could take that text, you could alter it, edit it, kind of morph it, and use that in some way. What's the virtue of that in video? It doesn't exist. It spits out a rendered clip. I can't alter anything within it. It's just a look at that, and maybe I can try to recreate it from scratch in an animation program, but it doesn't have that editability, that ability to kind of work with it. So I think the potential for man and machine to work together and forge this new direction, I think it's hypothetical that it could exist, but as right now, I don't see any real way for that collaboration with a tool to happen, certainly in a way that can lead to an interesting new direction.
And I think that's the right I think that's the right segue into the next question, in that if we're worried about the flattening of art and the way that art is then just derivative of whatever it's been trained on, the way that the AI models are developing it, what if the artist is able to take a more active role in the way that they're using it? So think about it this way. A lot of the text-based tools, they're being billed as a thought partner. You could use Claude or use ChatGPT as a thought partner to develop new ideas. What's the possibility of an AI tool being a good creative partner?
Can you go to the next slide and save us from rerun my edit? So the term creative partner is often used to make AI sound like a helpful studio assistant, but real partnership in art requires resistance. This is Su Chung. She's a great example of this. She's a Canadian Chinese artist. Her partnership with AI is physical. She works with robotic arms that mimic her gestures and create a feedback loop where she has to struggle to physically adapt to the machine's movement. It's not about ease, it's about struggle between two different bodies, one biological and one algorithmic. Trying to share a canvas. She works with these robotic arms in a process that she calls Embodied AI. When she draws, the robots respond to her neural data or her previous marks, and she has to respond back in real time. It's a dance of physical friction. She's interested in what it feels like in her body, the bending, the kneeling, the actual muscular resistance of the machine. And this isn't about the AI helping her draw. It's about a conversation where the machine is unpredictable and sometimes stubborn. And this is this physical presence that she's like working against as much as she's working with. Hio Serral is another great example. She's a really incredible German artist who has been sort of at the forefront of new technology in contemporary art for probably like the last 15 years. She uses AI to reveal the hidden structures of power and bias that software usually tries to hide. She isn't asking the AI to help her. She's engaging with it to expose its flaws. She has an installation in a film that came out about 5 years ago called This Is the Future, where she uses AI generated imagery to expose its failures, its biases, and its surveillance logic and its weird, like predictive hallucinations. This was like done with like 2019 AI generative technology. So it's like when it was like very weird looking. Artists like this can show us that a partner isn't someone or something that does the work for you. It's a force that you have to reckon with. If your AI partner isn't challenging your intent or making your work harder to justify your choices, then you aren't really collaborating. You're just being serviced by a piece of software. Real creative partnership, like real art, should be a bit of a struggle and should be a little messy.
Yeah, I think that the struggle aspect is interesting, but even in assistant, I would say, in terms of how it's pitched, doesn't even quite get there. So I've done that kind of amplification versus replacement binary again. So is the tool empowering you or diminishing your creative agency? I think most of the tools I found, it's not even that it does what it says; it just does its own thing completely. So it takes that agency away. It's a creative partner that doesn't seem that capable or interested in partnership at all. How these tools have been designed thus far. Basically, if we go into again Sora, which I mentioned earlier, Runway, a lot of these are you basing their design on something familiar, which is ChatGPT. So you enter a prompt that'll spit out an image or a video that follows that prompt to some degree. And as Sora being closed down yesterday might have shown, I certainly think that's a dead creative, or at least it's not a road Isaac Noser had any interest in traveling. Well, what I am excited for, and I don't know, maybe we'll differ on this a little bit, but I see is in localized applications to AI. So Photoshop's content aware is a version of this, right? Where it's not using a giant, large language model of different images scraped, in ethically dubious way. It's taking the image you have, it's using that information and using its predictive algorithm to figure out what else is there. So I did that earlier with the room here. I took a picture, generating more of it, and it looked pretty close to what was there. And that's an interesting thing. It's following your lead in this way. Another example I was going to pull up here, I think Stereo Studios is doing this. They worked with an artist in Los Angeles, really creative illustrator. I wish I had his name in front of me. Using those illustrations and then building 3D models on top of that to be able to animate in a way that feels true to the original artist's creative voice, right? We're not seeing that right now. We're not seeing that ability because I think it's going the wrong way. We're not starting from the artist's kind of vision and then building on top of that. But I think that might be changing, where these tools can follow your lead as the creator in a more straightforward way. I think of all things, Adobe is actually kind of doing some of this. They're reinvesting in some things that, especially some of the news tools we've been encountering, that I've been a little bit excited about. And again, these are much less sexy. They're not as attention grabbing as the LLM approach. They're not democratizing production in these ways. And I think that's all good. But it is help of tools that I want in our labs. I think that the kind of stuff that can really empower our productions on a day-to-day basis, and what I think might actually empower artists going forward.
I really appreciate that. I appreciate that discussion about agency because what I'm just as an aside, what I'm really taken with the example of the artist that Jason's talking about. The idea of embodied intelligence is usually about robotics where you use generative AI and it runs on its own. I love the sense of embodied intelligence being one where it's really embodied and driven by the human and controlled for resistance purposes. I like that. That makes a lot of sense. And that's an important role within this. That gets us to the fourth statement that we wanted to interrogate a little bit. And after that, we'll have time for questions from all of you. So start preparing your questions, get ready. We'll come around with microphones. This one is about the role of AI, maybe not as the creative partner, but to do the busy work, being more time for creativity. Is there a role for AI in the creative process if it's handling some of the work that you don't really want to have to do yourself, the grunt work? Maybe it's akin to not longer having to work in the dark room, but you have it digitized. So it's handling that work, freeing you up for more of the creative tasks.
Yeah, I think that what JD was just talking about leads us right into this because those Adobe tools, those things like being able to instantly select an object in Photoshop, or there's all of these rotoscoping tools that are available, and they were available in After Effects, and now they're in Premiere, where you can, that's some of the most time consuming work that you could do in video production, and being able to, and when you do it wrong, it looks really bad, and being able to click a button and it sort of works mostly instantly is pretty incredible. And it sort of, it really sent me uh, into like a lot of big questions about some of the stuff that I teach, because learning how to do that stuff properly was so important for so long. And then now you can click a button and it instantly, it's like, is that important to learn how to do? And I don't, and I kind of think it isn't. I don't know. This is the thing that I'm still thinking about. I guess my big question was like, you can do it if it can make something happen. If you can do something so instantly, what can we, if we were going to spend a whole class on this, 2 years ago, and now I can just say, click this and it worked. Like, well, what can we do with the rest of that class? What else can we be learning if this one, like, sort of tedious aspect has become automated? And that's, really showing up a lot in visual effects houses and work, at Hollywood films. Weta Effects, Peter Jackson's company, they're developing tools with Amazon Web Services under the promise that AI belongs in the service of artists, not the other way around. And so developing tools that automate mundane, time-consuming tasks, um, allowing artists to focus more of their time on high fidelity polish and creative direction. But like, as I said, as an educator, I have to ask, like, when does busy work stop being a chore and start being a teacher? If we automate the grind, do we lose the sort of the feeling for the medium? And if a student can use an AI tool that automates a tedious task like rotoscoping, they've saved time, but have they developed the same level of mastery as the artists who spend a week inside those pixels? Like, even though something like rotoscoping is tedious, I think it's kind of fun. And I'm glad that I know how to do it, but like, I really struggle with, do I need to teach that to people now? If it is so automated. There's an artist named Paul Chan who made a project called Paul Prime. He built an AI version of himself trained on his own writings and his email, and to handle the busy work of being an artist, with this idea that, like, a lot of people say, like, oh, like, AI should be, handling these tasks. If AI could answer my email and like wash my dishes, then like I would have more time to like do creative things, right? So he did that, and he didn't like it. And he found that the efficiency felt less like freedom and more like, he referred to it as an affliction. And he realized that the part of himself that he was saving through automation was actually his false self, that part that complies with external demands. And by outsourcing these like routine tasks, he felt like he was hollowing out his own presence. And he wasn't free to be more creative. He was haunted by a digital ghost. That's what he referred to. That's how he referred to it. Haunted by a digital ghost that could perform him better than he could. So I didn't know about this project until I started looking into it, and I really like the idea that someone did try to make an AI personal assistant that wrote all of their emails for them. So yeah, AI can handle busy work. It can save a lot of time, especially in like things like visual effects. But I think we have to be careful that in saving time, we aren't also discarding the very labor that gives our work and ourselves substance. Like, if all that's left is the big idea and none of the doing, are we still artists, or are we just managers of a machine? Which I think can also lead into a really interesting topic about a lot of really famous artists who just sort of function as managers of machines and have 30 people working for them who do all of the work. Which makes me think about personal work and like art that's done for art's sake, and will continued automation create a sense of detachment? And uh I mean, it makes me just really, when I start thinking about this stuff too much, I'm just like, I just get really into pottery. Like, uh and I think I am. And we can use AI to handle the drudgery, but within that labor, is that where art actually lives? One of my favorite quotes, which I don't know if, and my last quote, I think, of the day that I thought of when thinking about this stuff, is, the work is in the work. And I don't know it. I think I always thought it was John Cage, but I don't think he actually said that. But someone said it, and like meaning like this idea that, uh, like, you know, it's the journey, it's the process. Like, that's the most important part. And something I think about a lot when teaching, and like, and that maybe what you have at the end isn't the most important, but what you do along the way. And then if we're automating all of that, like, what do we have left?
Yeah, I think it's very case by case. I think about some tasks, like I mentioned, when that auto caption tool came in Premiere when I was in college, I was like, oh, thank God. Like, I don't have to do this. But there may have been value in the fact that I had to go through line by line, listen to everything. And I got to know that interview forward and backwards, right? And I probably helped my editing, removing background noise, right? That's a thing that we can automate. People in my class who recorded interviews Tuesday, they were not good, some of them, and we are going to be able to automate and fix some of that with some new AI tools. But that doesn't take away from the fact that we should learn how to mic and cook and all things, all those techniques are important there. So I think as you got at already, but I think it bears repeating, is getting at the very active idea of what do we mean by mundane here, especially within the context of these tools. Because as I've encountered most of these AI production tools, they consider everything a mundane task. They basically want to hook a tube up to your brain and put it right into the tool. So you just think it and it spits out the end product. And I think that's just an absolute fundamental understanding of what creative work is or should be. Creative work is a practice. So the work is the work, as you said. It's not fixed by this tube that does this magic machine. It's the making of the art that inspires the ideas, that allows you to develop your craft, your approach as an artist. I know videography, we talk about this, every step from storyboarding, filming the thing, figuring out your shots, editing, your pacing, your cutting, your lighting, how you're going to color correct something, sound mixing. These are not mundane tasks. These are the creative act, right? This is how you make meaning in a project. So the idea of automating them in the name of creativity is just ass backwards to me, especially at UMW, where our classes are about engaging with every step of the making process to build understanding of how those steps affect meaning, how you can develop your own approach to these steps, to find your voice through the medium. I think we need to protect the mundane in that way as an essential part of the creative process, especially how we teach it.
Well, thanks to both of the faculty members for their AI. I think we're all like digital ghosts. That's something I'm going to be left with. I want to ask the first question. We'd say a little bit about the format. We'll have about 20 minutes for questions. Then we'll have a chance for some closing remarks from Jason and JD. And then you'll have a chance to vote. We'll look at the results from that at the very end. I want to ask the first question before we start handing it off. And Professor Reno will have a microphone on this side. I'll have one over here. I have to, the full disclosure, this is coming from somebody who has a Velvet Elvis hanging in his office. What's the line between AI art and AI slop?
That's a really good question. I mean, my students will laugh because this is my answer to everything. Intention, I think, is a big part of it, and having an idea behind it, and a reason. I think, like, that's why, like, I mean, I feel like I'm so hard on a lot of these tools because most everything that's been made that I've ever seen has been bad. And that's kind of my big question, is my sort of, I'm maybe getting into my closing statement here a little bit, but like what happens when it's not bad? What happens when when it's not easily identifiable, and like when you can make it, and there can be some intention behind it, but like right now I'm not really seeing that.
And I'll just add creative control. I think is the other thing, right? I think you're still at the mercy of whatever they can spit out. And I think lacking that, it doesn't rise to the standard of art to me.
Well, usually when I make AI slop, I'm intending AI slop. Yes. Questions from the audience?
Thanks very much. I look at you both as digital art. Think of this moment now in relation to prior analog artists, right? You've kind of grown, and this has just been how you do it, right? Before that, it was, you got to cut film. I did a little video editing when it was like, oh yeah, it's on tape and it has to go backwards. And if you miss an edit, Well, you're going all the way back to the point where you missed that edit, and you're starting again and doing it all. The non-linear editing was always like, my gosh, So what are your thoughts about how, like, how does this contrast, this AI piece contrast to that?
Yeah, I think two ways in that. I mean, I think there's always, I mean, every generation has its precious labor, right? The thing that made their process better than or more, important than their other. And I know that's the case still today. I think we found that. And I think that's partially why I think about what is worth protecting, right? Where do we need to make a case for the hard way to do a thing? And what is the tool allowing us to open up space to put it more towards ideation or other parts that we can focus on class? I think economically was where my mind went immediately. And I think that's the thing that terrifies these tools to me so much, is that most of these tools are not pitched at artists or creatives. They're pitched at businesses who can use it in replacement of a creative. So I think we need to have an incredibly, often antagonistic. I certainly have a very antagonistic tool, because it's important to learn these skills in our classes, like actually can compete on the market. And I think that is a difference, certainly, than in an analog era, even early digital, right? Where the tools weren't actively trying to displace you. So, open. That's I think my consideration of what's different.
Yeah, and I think that there's been this anxiety before, and I mean, like a long time ago, like the invention of photography, and then like the switch over from film to digital. But like that was just the anxiety about like a tool changing, and like and this is like what we're talking about, where this is removing so much of the agency and like the ability. And I think that's and like, or even just like everyone having a camera in their pocket all of a sudden, it's like, what is photography if everyone takes thousands of pictures all the time? But like that this feels very different to me, because I think that it's trying to take over like so much of the process and the creativity. And so I think that that's a oversimplification and a bad analogy to be like, oh, like painters were scared of photography. But I also think that these leaps in technology like really push people uh, back to examine older technology. I was talking to JD before. There is a huge scene of artists that are using analog video now, like televisions and CRT TVs and stuff that you could get at Goodwill for $1. Like now, like are so hard to come by, because people are watching movies on VHS again. Because like there is people like that texture. And and then to go back to the film festival, I bet we did have several films that were AI generated, but we had 20 times as many that were shot on film. Like people are, yeah, and it's not easy to shoot on 16 millimeter or Super 8. Like it requires a lot of work. You got to get a camera, you got to make sure it works. You got to find some place to develop that film. But like people want, like artists like process that involves effort, and I think that is probably what turns a lot of people off, is that like the promise of something that's so simple. Yeah, I mean, I think I need to cut down my screen time.
Hi, I just saw you guys. So to me, AI just kind of centralizes the whole production process. Um, it makes it simple, as you all mentioned. But what can artists do now as a collective to kind of help each other um, centralize their work instead of having, like you mentioned right now, like developing the film, finding a camera that works. Like, what can artists do now to kind of help each other centralize their process instead of just use AI to do that for them?
Before you give up your money, Sarah, by centralize, can you define that a little bit more?
Like, do everything for you.
and the materiality comes to mind. Again, process. I think that's something I also come to, which may not be exactly in the spirit of your question, but is distribution. I think, something we mentioned the ethical issues here is by uploading your art, it becomes gobbled up by an algorithm that then uses trained data and spit out more stuff. So I think feeling some sort of collective action there that can create platforms for artists to distribute and share work that can avoid that sort of copyright infringement and theft. That's hard. And I think there are active efforts to do that. That's one thing that comes to mind to me. Anything else you're thinking of?
I think make friends with people who like to make art and hang out with them and make art with them together. I think a lot of these technologies are sort of encouraging you to be alone in your house. I think doing the opposite of that is something you need to do.
And I think spaces too, I think of on shop downtown and, Artful Dimensions and these spaces that I think we explore. I'm like, oh yeah, you can have those connection spaces. Cause you're right. I think the more we kind of sell this idea that art is all digital, it's all online, we're kind of losing that fabric of the community. And I think that is super important to reclaim.
Other questions?
Thank you. My question, and when I'm listening to all of your explanations, I come more from a literature, creative writing um, type of background, and you had said that um, that AI gets into a recursive loop, and that it's sort of spitting out um, material that already exists. And I'm just wondering, in a lot of times when we're reading literature, we get a sense, or maybe we're watching a movie, we get a sense, gosh, a lot of these plots sound familiar. And there's, a lot of theory out there, literary theory, that everything can be traced back to, this original text or original foundational texts. And all writers are readers, all artists consume art. It's already in our mind, and whether it's, so how is an artist that's got a bunch of art references in their mind and has been exposed to art, and they're obviously being conditioned to respond and maybe make modifications to it to try to do something new. How is that different from AI that's pooling from a bunch of art, try to modify, create something new?
It's interesting. Yeah. I just think the visual stuff is so much less sophisticated. I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm thinking of reference points. It's no, it's just stealing Studio Ghibli. It's just as simple as that sometimes, right? It's just oh, clearly it's just aping this other thing. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's an interesting point that I don't know if do you encounter that kind of sophistication?
Well, I think it's because it's different because it's being filtered through human experience, right? And not uh, an algorithm. If you're focused on trying to make something that's never been done before, it'll drive yourself crazy, and or even worse, making something and then trying to find the thing that you stole from, But the hope would be that you've uh, you've experienced all these different things, and then that's mixing, with your unique point of view, and that's not what the AI does not have a unique point of view or a lived experience.
And maybe it's because I'm more familiar, I just engage with visuals more, but I find its ability to even approximate that in text versus visuals to be so different, right? Where I think it can be very convincing, as in terms of maybe certain styles, scripts, things like that, all sorts of things, versus the visuals. Oh yeah, I see what that. Yeah, it's the origin's a little more obvious, which may be good for artists, for us, right? But yeah, it still feels not at the level you're describing in text. Yes, maybe soon.
But it seems a lot of the response is that it's good enough, and they can't do that convincing. What if, Jason, you get to the next film festival and you accept several of the films and you don't know that they're AI generated? How would you react if later you found out? Or what if when you're working on this, it comes up with something, we work with that idea that maybe it does advance to that point? Then it's no longer about whether or not it can do it, but do we want it to do it? And It seems to me a very different question.
That's for the next time. And come back when it can do that. But yeah, it's definitely something I think about.
Yeah. And it is interesting, this particular plateau of tip, right? Because I'm thinking of conversations you and I have had on, and it does feel like we've been kind of, for the insane advancement. Like I was going to show a slide open of like the Will Smith eating spaghetti meme, which was like the kind of test case for AI. That's from 2023. And it's just like absolute, like, horror. So like just gloopy face, awful. 2 years later, it's very convincing, right? So it looks like, oh, we're going to an AI movie within a year or two. And we just kind of hit this plateau. I can't make sense of that per se, but especially as I'm thinking about them building data centers everywhere. Just a point we haven't made about the environmental impact, I'll just say with video, I forgot what it is. I mean, it's absurd how much more energy usage it takes to generate a video clip versus just to type in ChatGPT. So I think they're running up against the limits of these tools. And I think video is a real canary in the coal mine for that right now. I'm pleased with that, right? Because I think, again, that direction is completely uninteresting to me. There's the local, it's really interesting stuff that could happen here. But I think and maybe what you're referring to, even that on it, of like, it can just generate a video like with text prompt. Like, I hope that goes away, right? I hope that all these skills we built, that it can build more inductively on skills we built within the production process, within the art process that's existed, rather than just kind of do this completely new thing that just attempts to disrupt and dismantle this practice that we really value, that we really, spent our lives investing in.
We have time for one or two more questions. There are others. Oh, fine.
So you guys have kind of talked about how there's like a ceiling with the generative stuff, but the formats and the way people interact with art over the years shifts. And when you have a lot of the people who are making these generative AI platforms also influence the stuff people want, especially with short form content and social media, what are you doing in your personal lives, or how would you try to fight off a little bit of like a hostile algorithm that's happening to make it so that, yes, there is a ceiling with what, Sora can make. But what if someone doesn't care to, watch a full 3-hour movie when they're just as happy seeing clips of like Love Fruit Island,
Yeah.
I had this in my notes and I took it out. So I'm very glad you asked this, because I think part of the thing that was very frustrating, I had that frustration with Sora and these tools, because I like making films and I could make films with it. But what I realized very shortly, and when Sora went to the second version, it became very apparent, is they don't care. They're not trying to make a short film. That's often in the phrasing, because it makes us think of the possibilities of this thing, but they want it to be a slot factory, right? And I think Veo and some of these other tools, that is the intent. Why does it mean anymore? And I think a lot of the investment of Meta and other corporations that are like trying to do ad sales and things like that, that is the future of these tools. It's not to get better in the way that I imagine them, to be able to solve continuity and create these short films. And that sucks. So I think in my own practice, right, that's partially why I have that like dichotomy of like amplification versus creative empowerment. And I want to focus on having tools that we use here that aren't just, contributing to the Slop factory, but actually can empower more complex, more ambitious forms of creation. I think in my own consumption, also trying to continue to engage with longer form content, because I think it's very worthwhile. I think visual language is something I'm very interested in. And I think a single shot just takes away so much interest and nuance and ability to tell stories and communicate. So I think that's kind of how I think about it from my own practice and teaching.
Yeah. In doing research for this talk, I saw so many posts that were just like, Hollywood is cooked. And then it was just like and then it was just like a video, and it was like all these sea dance, the AI generative video. And then it's like, I made this short film for $500 in 3 days. And I'm like, I know.
Yes.
And it's like the quality, the Will Smith eating spaghetti is getting better, but the ability to use those tools to turn it into something that is coherent and can engaging is still seems very far away to me, even if you can sort of render things more realistic. Like there's sort of the ability to like put the images together the way JD has described it, is like that still feels really far away. To use it in an artful, interesting way.
It's so right. We need to worry about it because you won't go and watch a 3-hour movie, but you'll doom scroll TikTok for 3 hours. Right? That's a thing we need to be very aware of, right? I think as creators, of people who wanted to watch our content, to support more complex work.
Right. So, regardless of whether the generated outputs of these models are good or considered art in any way, I personally don't think they are, but of course there's nuance to that. Could a model itself be considered art? Would there be criteria for that? Would some models qualify?
I think yes, is my immediate gut, but I think it involves something that we have not really seen. And it makes me think about early discussions we had about glitch and hallucination. A lot of the reason there was openings for those, even something like, Pumpkin Pie, can you talk to me? He was able to open up these CRT TVs and mess with things. And I think that's the thing that's missing with the AI tools right now. Is they're black boxes. Like I can't mess with ChatGPT. I don't know what, we can learn about it, but like we have no control over that algorithm. It's back to creative control, but I think you can have a creative AI. You can have something that generates art, but it's got to see that agency. It's got to be something we can actually mess with and collaborate with. And what was your word with the fracture? What did you use? Rupture? Opportunities for that, right? But again, other than building your own, or like maybe that's where artists collaborate and make some weirdo AI that's going to like allow for that sort of interesting play and experimentation. I think tools like a Claude or a ChatGPT or any like Gemini, I just don't see it. But I think thinking very alternatively, thinking as an artist would, I think it is very possible.
Sure, yeah. I agree. You can't the black box that I referred to earlier, the idea that like all of these are like a secret and there's no way of hacking it, and it keeps I think interesting art from being able to be made with it when it's like the exact opposite of open source. There's no opportunity to sort of open it up and see how it works and iterate or break it or do that kind of thing. Also, I have to say, do not open up an old TV. It can kill you. A TV, an old CRT TV can hold enough electricity to shock you unplugged for 3 years.
Do you learn it the hard way or?
No, but like, it's important. If anyone mentions opening up a TV, I have to say that.
For that concept warning, bro.
I feel like take that clip and put it on more. Well, that was excellent. Some really great questions. We're going to move to some short closing remarks and then your vote. So I'm going to put this up here so that you can access the QR code. But let me turn it over to, I don't know if you would like to go first.
Finish one more time emphasizing my dichotomy between AI tools that creatively amplify and those that replace our creative labor. A lot of visual tools, as I mentioned, got to have the best interests of artists or creatives in mind. And the whole idea of getting a finished poster or video just from typing in a prompt, text bar, a prompt in a text bar, it's not democratizing, it is de-skilling. It allows these developers to offer a good enough alternative to actual design and production, so you don't have to hire that creative. It's replacing the labor. I think if we want to support student creatives, many of whom are here today, as they try to navigate this job market, especially, we cannot be supporting tools that are working against them. That said, I don't think that covers all AI tools. I think there's really exciting stuff, or at least every day, that does amplify that creativity and production quality. I see this on a semester by semester basis. I think we're able to increase the quality and do more cool stuff every semester because some of these new tools are rolling out. So I'm not purely cynical on that. So some of the applications I talked about, especially localized AI, that allow for that editability, that creative control, that don't force you to see creativity. I'm all about those. So I think as we figure out our usage in art making and media production here on campus, it should focus on that amplification of creativity. Has to be a top priority. And I think it's just a matter of trial and error in order to get there.
Great, thank you. one thing that we didn't get to talk about today that is really important to me that I want everyone to know is that generative AI is not, generative art is not synonymous with AI. Generative art has existed for decades. It just means art where the artist designs a process rather than a final object. Vera Molnar, she wrote code in the 60s and made some of the first computer generated art. Saul LeWitt, he provided a set of written instructions for a wall drawing that others could make uh, themselves. And even a wind chime is a generative instrument. The artist designs the system and the wind creates the song. The difference, as we've talked about so much today, is agency. In traditional generative art, the artist builds a machine, and in AI art, the artist is often just a passenger in the machine, a machine built by a corporation. So, like we were talking about earlier, we have to defend the right to build our own systems. And another thing that I uncovered in my research for this is this tool called Glaze that allows you to, like I talked about earlier, hate the technology properly. It puts minimal changes into a digital image that confuses AI. Some artists and scientists at the University of Chicago are working on it right now, but I really like this idea of resistance towards the algorithm and saying that you can see my work, but you can't have my data. And I think there'll be a lot more of that. There's a lot of really interesting work a few years ago dealing with ways of confusing um, uh, cameras, like surveillance cameras and the facial recognition. I think that stuff is really exciting. So to bring it back to the original question, should AI be banned in classes, in art classes? I think definitely in intro level classes, banned in mine. And it's interesting too, because I think about like across other classes, like an English class or something, it like maybe takes a little longer to figure out if someone's using it, but there's at this point where the technology, there's no way anyone could use it without us knowing. And so it's pretty easy to say, don't use it. And it's so confident that no one's using it, but I understand that they will continue to get trickier. But in upper level classes, like I teach a new media class, and I'm fine with students exploring this technology with a critical eye, like we talked about today, because that's what the class is about. And as I said earlier, I think it's easier to feel so sure about that now because it's easy to spot, and it always looks bad, in my opinion. But I wonder what will happen when the technology reaches a point where you can't tell the difference. I think that's something to think about. I don't know the answer to that.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating discussion. A lot, and it looks like from your responses, you all did as well. Let me share some of the results. First is the result from the pre-debate survey. You were to vote now. Would you say that UMW should ban AI from art classes in the creative arts? 1 is yes, 5 is no. And so you see a interesting split, leaning more toward the yes, but quite a few in the middle, and even 6 over on the right saying no, it shouldn't be banned. These following results are all from the post-debate survey. After the debate, how familiar are you with issues about AI and creativity? Far to the right, saying they've learned a great deal. They're far more familiar now than you were before. As a result of the debate, do you feel more informed? Again, far to the right, a couple of people maybe to the left that have been thinking a lot about this, and maybe it's not a new topic, but for most of us, we find ourselves really feeling more informed as a result. Now that you've heard the debate, would you say that UMW should ban AI from art classes and creative arts? It's a little more mixed. There's still quite a few over on the left, but moving a lot from the 1s to the 2s, and then across the board, you see some support in different areas, really just representing how complicated the issue is. And even as Fred Robinson was saying, it's not really about banning it for everything. It's about where it's appropriate or not appropriate. And then before the debate, you were asked how you would vote. As a result, have you changed your vote? 16 people said no. And then a few said that they did, but not as many. So it didn't really move the opinion. But more importantly, people feel more informed about this debate, and they were able to get more out of the discussion. So I want to give one more round of applause to JD and appreciate it. We will have one more opportunity to have some public discussion about some AI in education, and that'll be during Research and Creativity Day. We're finalizing the date for that. We have several research groups of faculty and students who have been working together over the course of the semester, including Professor Sudzinski, to be able to think about some implications for AI in their fields. So we encourage you to join us during Research and Creativity Day on April 24th. We'll have information about that coming out soon. Thanks again.